Hey everyone, if you've ever experienced a frozen shoulder, or maybe you're struggling with it right now, you know just how frustrating and painful it can be. It feels like your shoulder is locked into place, making even simple tasks like putting on a shirt or reaching for something totally impossible. But what if I told you there's more to frozen shoulder than just a stiff joint? And even more important, what if I told you that many of the common treatments don't really get to the root cause of the problem? In today's video, we're going to break down exactly why frozen shoulder happens, why traditional treatments often fail, and most importantly, what you can do about it. So stick around. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this. Frozen shoulder, also known as adhesive capsulitis, is when your shoulder joint stiffens up and mobility becomes very limited. This usually happens because the connective tissue around your joint thickens and tightens, which restricts movement and leads to pain. But don't kid yourself, this does not happen overnight. It usually starts as a mild discomfort, maybe just a little feeling stiff as you lift your arm up, and then out of nowhere, bam! It progresses into this full-blown frozen shoulder. For many people, it can take up to 3 years for this condition to resolve on its own. You heard me right, up to 3 years. And we're not talking about mild inconvenience here. The pain can be very severe and the stiffness can limit even daily activities such as brushing your hair or even driving your car. So why does frozen shoulder even happen in the first place? Well, this condition is most common in people between the ages of 40 and 60, and it usually is linked to things like injuries, surgeries, or prolonged immobilization. So for instance, you ever had your arm in a sling, you know that when it came out of that sling 6 weeks later, moving your arm could be very difficult. So immobilization, not getting out and moving every day, can lead to things like frozen shoulders. But here's something that might surprise you, is that frozen shoulder can actually develop without any obvious injury at all. Now, sometimes it's connected to diseases like diabetes and thyroid disorders and heart disease, but did you know that stress and poor posture can also contribute to it? Things like sitting behind a computer for hours on end, scrolling on your phone hour after hour, or sitting in things like recliners, which means we may all be more vulnerable than we think. In short, your body's just trying to protect itself. It stiffens up to prevent further injuries or strain, but in doing so, it creates an even bigger problem. And that brings me to the next part. Why do so many treatments for frozen shoulder actually fail? If you've had frozen shoulder for any length of time, you've probably heard the usual recommendations: rest, physical therapy, maybe even steroid injections or surgery. And while these can help reduce the symptoms, they don't always treat the root of the cause. First of all, rest. It seems logical, right? If your shoulder hurts, you certainly don't want to use it, but prolonged rest can actually make things worse. The longer you keep that shoulder immobile, the stiffer it becomes. You can fall into a vicious cycle where the less you move, the more painful it gets when you try to move. Physical therapy is another common approach, and it does help a lot of people, but here's the catch. If it's not the right kind of therapy, or if you're not consistent with it, it won't give you long-term relief. In fact, an overly aggressive exercises can sometimes make the pain even worse. Steroid injections. They can temporarily reduce inflammation, but they don't address the underlying tight muscles that are causing that pain. And of course, then there's surgery. That's a last resort. And we all know that carries its own set of risks. So what do you do when you try out all of these standard treatments and still feel stuck? Okay, so now to the good news. There is ways of fixing a frozen shoulder that won't take you a lot of time, but the key here is that you have to be consistent with it. That means a daily thing, and if you're smart, you'll take these things that I'm showing you and you'll continue them throughout the rest of your life so that you never have to deal with it again, unless you'd like to have it again, okay? So let's get started here. So when we're looking at the frozen shoulder, for some of them, lifting your arm out this way becomes difficult. This way is impossible. This way is really painful. So what happens is not the joint. Everybody sort of focuses on the joint, and that's a major mistake. When I lift my arm this way, and the same is for you, mine's not different from yours. When I lift my arm this way, three things actually happen. The outside chest muscle has to release so my arm can come up. The shoulder blade has to be able to rotate so my arm can come up. And then the traps and the muscle called a supraspinatus up here has to contract to lift my arm up. The same is true if I do this here. The same is true as if I do this here, okay? So in those movements, all three of those areas have to work together like a team. If any one, in other words, if the front here is tight, the shoulder blade doesn't want to rotate, and I try to lift my arm, I'm going to get pain shooting down my arm because the muscles here on top, the traps and the supraspinatus, are overworking because the muscle here is not releasing or the shoulder blade is not rotating, and that too is based on muscles, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. So when you are looking at your shoulder and you start to lift your arm and you go, wow, that really hurts, and I'm getting pain down here, does not mean that the cause is in the deltoids out here on the outside. They can be tight, but that doesn't mean that's the root cause. So what we want to do here is, number one, start to look to see what's causing a problem. I typically, on a daily basis, and usually when I'm taking a shower, but you can do it any time, I put my arm against the wall this way, and I take my hand and I come in and I press. And I press. But notice how slow I'm pressing. I'm not doing this kind of thing. I'm not doing where I'm grabbing in, and I'm not trying to push really, really hard so that I can see. No. I don't know why people teach us this about muscles, but it's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Come in here, go easy. So when I press here, I'm only pressing hard enough until I can see when that first sign of discomfort comes up. If it doesn't, no matter how hard I press, I move to the next spot. Now, when I find a spot that is sore here, what I'm going to do is, when I get that first little bit of discomfort, I'm going to stop the pressure but maintain it. And the reason I'm maintaining it is my fingers are saying to my brain, go to this spot, okay? I'm going to breathe out, and it's a nice slow breath, like inhale, breathe out, and allow the brain and the body to relax. And you'll start to feel over time, a short period of time, the muscle actually starting to relax. You can release it, go to another spot. If that spot is sore too, repeat and do the same thing again. But what you'll notice is that as you do this a couple of times a day, this muscle will start to soften, and you'll find that you can squeeze harder and harder and harder, and there is no pain. Okay, so that's the first thing that we want to do. On the back side over here, like I said earlier, this arm goes into a socket in the shoulder blade, and so when I lift my arm, the shoulder blade has to rotate from the bone structure of the body for that to happen. But from the muscle structure of the body, there are muscles between the shoulder blade and the spine called rhomboids, and they can get tight, which restricts the shoulder blade from actually rotating. Get yourself a tennis ball. Don't get a cue ball, a ball that has spikes on it. I don't care if it vibrates, it talks to you, or sings to you. You don't need any of that mess. Just get a tennis ball. I mean, they're not that expensive. Put it in a sock, lean against the wall, but throw the ball over your shoulder, lean against the wall, and you're not going to roll on it like you're playing around with a toy, but just like with your hand here, you're going to hit one spot at a time to see where spots that are sore. Now, when you hit a spot, just as it starts to become painful, stop, maintain that pressure, and again, inhale, breathe out, and allow the brain and the muscle to relax. And when it does, the muscle will let go, and you can work all around that shoulder blade and on top of that shoulder blade. In fact, If this is tight here, the muscles on top of the shoulder blade will be sore. So let me go back to this tennis ball and the sock here. That sock is important because two reasons. If you drop it, you don't have to chase it. But number two, you have a little handle, you can throw it over your shoulder, lean against the wall, and work on your back there to soften that up. Even when this shoulder pain goes away, I would do that at least twice a day for the rest of my life. I don't care how young or how old you are, because your muscles will tighten from everything you think, feel, and do. Now I'm going to put a couple of links in my description down below for the outside chest muscle. I've done this in several videos, so I'll put a link to the video to show you how to do that when you do that. But I would do those two things first, and then I would come in and do the stretch in the doorway here and see if that helps you out here. So don't forget, subscribe down below, ring the bell so you don't miss any more of these videos. And as always, leave comments. If you have questions, something's not quite right, you don't quite understand it, ask me. I'll be glad to help you. And for now, see ya. I hope you enjoyed this last video. Be sure to click on the video here to my left and enjoy.